much. I very much enjoyed this paper, Sterilized Foreign Exchange Intervention as a Complementary Macroprudential Measure by Dr. Atish Ghosh at the IMF. I prepared some overview notes on macroprudential policy because it seems to be a recurrent and important theme in terms of policy measures to deal with excessive growth of private debt. But because of the time constraints, I will skip that and go straight to my comments on the paper. So let me begin by giving a summary, very brief summary of the paper by Dr. Ghosh. So and it's a very short summary, by the way. What he does is he looks at the role of a sterilized foreign exchange intervention as a complementary macroprudential measure. And I really think the key word here is complementary. And Dr. Ghosh, right, goes to great pains to emphasize that this is not the main purpose of sterilized FX intervention, reducing credit growth. That's not the main purpose, of course. It's strictly a complementary or additional or one more macroprudential measure. So what he knows is that a potential side benefit of this kind of sterilized foreign exchange intervention is that it absorbs capital inflows, which in turn helps to limit the pace of credit growth. And of course, limiting credit growth in turn, that reduces the probability of a financial crisis, especially in emerging markets. And he provides, he showed some regression, some empirical evidence that shows that sterilized intervention, right, can mitigate or reduce the impact of capital flows on bank credit expansion. The paper, in the empirical econometric analysis, it uses standard methodology, so I don't have much to say on that. And it's conceptually clear and well-written, concise, and well-structured in usual IMF style. Now, having given you a very brief summary or my take on the paper, let me provide three specific comments on the paper. Again, I think one key issue here is what is the complementarity between sterilized FX intervention and traditional macroprudential measures such as DTI and LTV that were talked about earlier this morning. Again, this is not to say that Dr. Ghosh does not emphasize, because indeed he emphasizes that this is basically a complementary macroprudential policy tool. And yes, it is also, I agree from his argument and reasoning that it can be an effective and quite flexible, no calibration needed kind of a measure. But what I would be quite interested to know is what is the relationship between this sterilized FX intervention and more traditional, right? More conventional macroprudential measures, whether it's LTV, DTI, and other kind of measures. Of course, to analyze that issue, you can do cross-country analysis if the data is there, or country case study or country case event study. Now, my second point is what is the effect of this kind of sterilized FX intervention on other types of financial stability? Because when you look at when you talk about macroprudential policy measures, actually there are three types of macroprudential policies which are geared to tackle three types of financial stability risks. One is credit-related risks. In other words, macroprudential measures geared toward tackling credit-related risks to financial stability. Another one is a macroprudential policies geared toward tackling liquidity risks to financial stability. And the last but not least, there are macroprudential policies that are tailored toward addressing capital-related risks to financial stability. So the analysis or the paper by Dr. Ghosh does look at the impact on credit-related risk, credit growth, bank-originated credit growth to be more specific, but it would also be more interesting to look at its potential impact on other types of financial stability, in particular leverage growth, as well as perhaps other measures of financial conditions, liquidity conditions rather. And last but not least, And this is, because the paper itself I liked a lot because it's a creative and original, think outside the box kind of paper, so I'll give a very brief kind of think outside the box kind of comment. So according to the paper, according to the evidence, empirical analysis of the paper, capital flows may increase the likelihood of financial crisis, primarily through two channels: currency overvaluation and domestic credit growth. I think it would be interesting to, if it's possible, to empirically assess the relative importance of the two channels, currency overvaluation versus domestic credit growth, because the opposite side of the same coin is what is the relative importance of sterilized versus FX intervention in sterilized FX intervention. And finally, and this is just food for thought, currency appreciation is, of course, analytically equivalent to monetary tightening. So I think one might do well to consider the impact of that on financial stability. Okay, thank you.